I always thought birthdays would feel warmer when you got older, softer somehow, like the edges of your days smooth out with time. But mine felt colder that year. Not because of the weather, though the February wind rattled the windows like it was asking to come in, but because of something else, something quieter. They threw me a party, yes, a nice one, I suppose. White tablecloths from the back closet, plastic cutlery, balloons from the discount bin that someone forgot to inflate all the way. They meant well, I know they did. Linda brought the cake, vanilla, from the corner grocery, the kind with frosting so thick it leaves your teeth aching. She placed it on the table like she'd just crossed something off her to-do list. I watched her brush crumbs off her phone screen more gently than she looked at me. No one asked what I wanted. Not what kind of cake, not what kind of day, not even how I was feeling. Grace joked that I should be thankful we didn't light candles, might burn the place down with all those years. Everyone laughed. I did too, quietly. But inside, it didn't land like a joke. It landed like a reminder. I looked around that living room, mine, still technically mine, and felt like I didn't belong in it anymore. The walls were covered in photos I didn't frame. My chair, the old one by the window, had been moved to make space for more guests. I stood most of the evening. No one noticed. Tom used to say, "You always remember the birthdays no one remembers." I used to laugh at that, thought it was one of his dramatic sayings. But he was right. He often was, in those quiet ways that only came to me after he was gone. They passed out paper plates and sang the song, too fast, like it was something to get through. Rebecca sliced the cake into perfect squares, wiping the knife clean between each one like it mattered more than the flavor. When she handed me my piece, I stared at it for a moment, then placed it down on the coffee table. It sat there, untouched, next to the stack of napkins and a half-empty glass of something fizzy. I listened to them talk. About Jeremy's job, Calvin's new car, Grace's son getting into kindergarten. Big things to them. But no one asked me about my garden. No one mentioned the Afghan I'd been crocheting since December, the one still folded on the arm of that displaced chair. At one point, I looked out the window. A bird had landed on the sill, a red one, bright against the gray sky. It looked right at me, stayed there for a long moment, then flew away. I envied it a little, the ability to come and go, to be seen and then not. When they left, all at once in a rush of hugs and leftover containers, I stood at the door and waved. Linda said, "Love you, Mom," over her shoulder, already halfway down the steps. I whispered it back, though she didn't hear. I closed the door slowly, pressed my back against it, listened to the silence fill up the house like water in a glass. The cake was still on the table, a few pieces missing, crumbs scattered like footprints. I picked up my slice and walked to the sink, dropped it in without a sound. Then I sat at the kitchen table, alone for the first time that day, and opened the small drawer beneath the phone, the one where I keep odd bits, a pen that barely works, old coupons, notepads from doctor's offices. I pulled out a fresh page and wrote in neat letters, February 7th, no candles, no flavor, no questions, just noise. I folded it once and tucked it under the placemat. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed someone, someday, to find it. The heater hummed as I made tea, chamomile, always chamomile on days that feel like this. I wrapped my hands around the mug and looked back at the table. That was the night I realized something. Not that they didn't love me. I believe, in their way, they still do. But that love changes. Sometimes into convenience, sometimes into obligation. And sometimes it just forgets your favorite flavor. It was Lisa's turn to host Sunday dinner. She'd been planning it for weeks, or so she said. I arrived 5 minutes early, as always, holding a pie I made that morning with the last of the apples from my tree. It was still warm. I carried it in both hands like a memory. No one greeted me at the door. I let myself in, stepped around 2 pairs of shoes and a forgotten backpack. I could hear laughter from the kitchen. My name wasn't in it. "Hey, Mom," Lisa said when she finally looked up. "You're early." She took the pie, didn't smell it, didn't ask if I'd made it, just placed it beside a plastic container of grocery store cookies. "Kids, make space. Grandma needs a spot," she called out. I looked around for a seat. The dining table was already full. Her husband, her two boys, Rebecca and her twins, even Jeremy had made it. No chair left. Someone dragged over a low stool from the playroom and tucked it beside the little plastic table near the window. "Here you go," Lisa said, brushing crumbs off a Batman placemat. "You're lucky we have room." She smiled like it was a joke. I nodded like it didn't matter. I sat carefully, knees pressed together, and tried not to notice how the table tilted whenever the kids leaned too hard. Tried not to notice the lasagna on my plate. Slightly dry, slightly cold, the kind of warm that only comes from being reheated in a rush. I used to make lasagna from scratch, thick with meat and memory, sauce simmered low for hours while socks dried on the radiator. I'd let them lick the spoon, always pretending I didn't mind. I still have the old pan with the dent in the corner, the one from the night Grace dropped it, and we all laughed until we cried. No one asked if I remembered that. No one asked me anything, really. I watched them eat at the big table, passing bread and stories and inside jokes. I couldn't quite hear everything they said, just the bursts of laughter, the scraping of forks, the clink of glasses. All the sounds that used to mean togetherness. Now they sounded like distance. One of the twins spilled his juice. Rebecca sighed and pulled him away, never once looking in my direction. When I reached for a napkin to help, no one noticed. I thought about all the dinners I'd cooked, how I used to wait to eat, just to make sure everyone else had enough, how I'd quietly take the smallest portion, the burnt piece, the end slice, and smile like it was my favorite. They never saw that. They still don't. The room was warm, but I couldn't stop shivering. Not from cold, just from the hollow. When dinner ended, they started clearing plates in a rush of noise and elbows. Lisa stacked mine with the kids' dishes, ketchup smeared across the edge. "You didn't eat much," she said. I didn't answer. She offered me coffee, instant, from a pod. I said no. Then went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and found the stew I'd left there 2 weeks ago, unopened, untouched. I spooned a bit into a bowl and placed it in the microwave. The buttons beeped, the light flicked on, and the hum filled the room like a heartbeat. It was loud, too loud. Or maybe everything else had just gone too quiet. No one came in. No one asked what I was heating. When it was done, I sat at the kitchen counter, away from the laughter in the living room. I ate slowly. Each bite warmed something in me the lasagna couldn't reach. It still had the cinnamon, still had me. Outside, the sky was dimming. One of the boys ran through the hallway yelling, "Game night!" They never asked if I wanted to play. Maybe they forgot I used to teach them how. I rinsed my bowl, wiped the counter, folded the same towel I brought from home last month, still hanging on their oven handle. No one noticed me leave the room. I sat near the front door, coat folded on my lap, waiting for someone to ask if I was okay. No one did. So I stood, slowly, and let myself out. The air outside was cool, honest. No voices, no laughter, just the wind and the sound of my own breath. Tom always said a house was more than walls and windows. A house is where your people feel safe, he told me once, wiping sweat from his brow after sealing the last box with tape. We were helping Lisa move into her new home, the one with the brick porch and the big bay window, the one I helped pay for. She and her husband had fallen short on the down payment. She called me late one night, voice trembling with pride and panic. "Ma, we just need a little help, just until things settle. You always said home is everything," and I had, over and over, through meals cooked on borrowed stoves, winters with the heater turned low, birthdays celebrated with just enough. Home was everything, and they were mine, so I gave her my bangles, the gold ones from our wedding day. I remember the sound they made as I dropped them, one by one, into the little velvet pouch, like tiny bells ringing out the end of something. Tom stood beside me quietly that night. He didn't stop me. He only said, "It's for their future," and I nodded, because it was, because I wanted it to be. That was 10 years ago. Now, I knock. Not every time. Sometimes I ring the bell. Sometimes I just stand there, hoping someone hears the shuffle of my feet on their welcome mat. The one that says, "Family is everything." Funny. There was a time I'd walk in with a spare key. Used to water their plants when they were away. Used to bake cinnamon rolls and leave them in the kitchen before they woke. Used to be invited. Now the key doesn't work. They changed the locks. Lisa said it was for safety, and I said nothing, because arguing feels heavier when you know no one's listening. I still bring food sometimes, leave it in little foil-covered containers, stews, rice, her favorite lemon cake, though I doubt she remembers it's her favorite. Last week, I rang the bell and waited. The sun was strong. I had a small container in my hand, still warm. I heard footsteps inside, laughter, the TV, a child squeal. And then, nothing. No door opened, no curtain moved. I waited 5 full minutes, then set the food down carefully, like a fragile part of myself. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want them to feel obligated to call. I walked back to the car slowly, half hoping someone would swing the door open and shout, "Wait, Ma, we didn't hear you." But they did. They always do. Once, Grace caught me outside. She stepped out with a trash bag in her hand, startled. "Oh, Ma, we didn't know you were here." She hugged me like it was a reflex, not warmth, just muscle memory. She glanced down at the Tupperware I was holding. "More food?" she asked. I nodded. She took it, smiled politely, and said, "You know, we order in a lot now, right?" And then she turned and walked inside. The door didn't close gently. Tom wouldn't have liked this part. He was quieter than me, but he believed in dignity. He would have said, "Don't give to people who've forgotten what you gave." But he's not here, and I don't know how to stop giving. Sometimes I sit in my own kitchen and wonder what part of me they see now, if they see anything. I wasn't always this gray, this small. There were years when I held that whole family together like stitches in a seam. Now I feel like a loose thread, tugged at, trimmed, discarded. Rebecca once joked at dinner, "Ma, you act like the house is yours." And I almost laughed. Because it was. Not in name, not in paperwork, but in sacrifice. They see walls. I see the gold bangles that lined the down payment. I see the weekend shifts Tom picked up so we wouldn't fall behind. I see a woman scraping coins from a sugar tin to buy curtain fabric. But all they see now is an old woman who comes uninvited, who stands too long at the door, who brings food no one asks for. I try not to blame them. Maybe it's easier for them to forget. Maybe memory is heavier when you're the one who owes something. But some days, I wish they'd open the door before I knock. I wish the porch light stayed on. I wish someone would look through the peephole and smile. Not out of pity, but because they're glad I came. The porch swing was the first thing Tom built after we moved into that house. He used pine from the mill, sanded it smooth, painted it white, said it would be our little sanctuary, a place to sit when the world got too loud. And it was. That swing held me when my body was still learning how to be a mother. I'd sit there nursing Grace at dawn, the sky barely blue, birds just beginning their songs. Tom would hand me a cup of tea, kiss the top of my head, and say, "You're doing good, sweetheart," even when I wasn't sure I was. That swing held me the night we lost the second baby. I sat wrapped in his jacket, rocking slow, counting stars I couldn't name. Tom didn't say much that night, just held my hand and let the quiet carry what we couldn't. Some griefs live in wood grain, and that swing knew ours. Over the years, it became part of the house, like the creaky stair or the dented mailbox. It heard secrets, saw scraped knees, held bags of groceries when my hands were full. Lisa carved her initials into the armrest when she was 9. Rebecca used to nap on it during summer storms. It groaned, it weathered, it stayed. Until it didn't. I came by one afternoon, a pie in hand, just like always. The driveway had new stones, the windows had new shutters. The porch had no swing. In its place stood a sleek bench, black metal, shiny cushions in colors that didn't know warmth, cold even in July. I stood there for a long time, longer than I should have, pie cooling in my hands. I reached out and touched the metal armrest. It was still warm from the sun, but it had no memory. Lisa came to the door with a smile. "Ma, you like it? We finally updated the porch. That swing was falling apart." She waved her hand as if brushing away the past. Just didn't fit the vibe anymore. I looked around. The wind chimes were gone too, replaced by a security camera blinking at me like an eye that didn't blink. She took the pie, kissed my cheek, ushered me inside. I didn't ask where the swing had gone. She didn't say. That night, I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling. I remembered every creak that swing ever made. I remembered how it sounded when Tom sat beside me, the rhythm of his weight settling. I remembered my babies in my arms, the smell of milk and talcum, the tiny socks tucked into my sweater pocket. And I realized I hadn't really come to bring pie. I came to sit, to feel something solid under me, something that remembered who I was, something that still spoke my language. The next day, I walked around the back of the house, past the shed, just to see. The swing wasn't there. Not in the garage, not under the tarp by the fence. It hadn't been saved. It had been erased. They called it modernizing. I call it forgetting. Because when you replace something that held love with something that holds nothing, you're not just decorating, you're deleting. I wanted to tell Lisa, to sit her down and say, "Sweetheart, that swing wasn't just furniture. It was a chapter. It was the soft part of this family story." But I didn't. She wouldn't understand. Or worse, she'd pretend to. Tom would have noticed. He'd have looked at that bench and said, "That thing's got no soul." And I would have laughed because he was right. He always knew when something was missing, even before I said a word. Now I keep a photo of the swing in the drawer by my bed. It's faded, but you can see the paint chipping, the cushions slightly askew. Tom's hand is resting on mine, our feet touching. The kids are blurry in the background, mid-laughter. That's the thing about memories. They're messy and real. Not polished, not made of steel. I wasn't looking for anything, not really. Just scrolling, the way people do when they're too tired to sleep but too restless to lie still. The glow of the screen lit up my bedroom like a quiet candle, flickering over old picture frames and worn-out wallpaper. And then I saw it. The listing was plain. 3 photos, no staging, just a little blue house, faded shutters, cracked walkway, ivy curling around the porch posts like it was reaching for something. I blinked, then blinked again, because I knew that house. It was next door to Lisa's. We used to know the woman who lived there, Miss Carter. She'd bring us plum jam in old jars and sit on her porch knitting things none of us asked for, but always wore. She passed 2 winters ago, and now her house was waiting. Charming fixer-upper, the listing said. Quiet street, close to schools, no mention of the way the porch catches the morning light. No mention of the wind chimes that used to hang from the gutter, playing songs only the birds understood. It wasn't grand. Nothing inside me wanted grand anymore. But it was separate, close enough to see them, but not close enough to be ignored. I sat up straighter, heart suddenly alert in a way it hadn't been in months. I ran a finger across the top of the screen, zooming in on the peeling paint, the overgrown lawn. It wasn't beautiful, but it looked like freedom. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, listening to the ceiling fan creak, thinking about what it might mean to stop asking, to stop knocking, to stop hoping for a seat at a table I once set. Tom would have raised an eyebrow. 2 houses on the same block? And then he'd laugh that quiet laugh of his. But I think, deep down, he'd have understood. I showed Grace the listing the next day, casually, like I wasn't already imagining curtains. She squinted at it, then shrugged. "You? All alone in that place?" She said it like I hadn't already been alone for years. Lisa's reaction was sharper. "Why would you move there? You already come over all the time. What's the point?" I didn't answer, because explaining it felt like handing over something delicate they might step on. It wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about distance. It was about air and the right to breathe it. I went to see the house that week, walked slowly through each room, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The kitchen still had wallpaper with tiny pears on it, faded, peeling at the corners. The living room smelled like dust and lavender. And the porch. Ugh, the porch. There was no swing, but there was a hook. Still rested, still waiting. I ran my fingers over it and smiled. The agent talked numbers. I nodded. She asked if I was serious. I looked out the window, and there it was, Lisa's house. Big, shiny, modern, her car in the driveway. And suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore. "Yes," I said, "I'm serious." I ironed the blouse twice, once the night before, once that morning. It was soft with age, a pale lavender, with a thread coming loose on the left sleeve. Tom had always loved it, said it made me look like spring, even in the middle of November. I wore it to his funeral. I hadn't put it on since, but that morning, I needed something that made me feel brave, something that still carried the scent of him. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, brushed my hair back, pinned it the way he liked, slipped on earrings I hadn't worn in years, small gold hoops. He gave them to me on our 25th anniversary because you never ask for anything, he'd said. The realtor's office was quiet, smelled faintly of printer ink and fresh carpet. I sat on a stiff gray chair and folded my hands. They felt older than usual. The woman across the desk, Karen, I think her name was, smiled with that soft kind of pity people use on women who carry their own bags. She slid the papers toward me like they were fragile. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" she asked. "Sometimes family likes to be involved in decisions like this." I smiled, polite. "I've been alone for a long time. I know how to do it well." She hesitated, then tried again. "Any children? Someone who can help with the move? Boxes, furniture?" My smile stayed, but my answer was sharper, more certain. "No, I'm doing this myself." She blinked, nodded. Something shifted in her after that, not quite respect, but a kind of distance, like she understood I wasn't the sort to be handled. The pen felt heavy in my hand, the good kind of heavy, like something solid, something chosen. I looked at the lines I had to initial, the final place I had to sign. There, in that long, empty space, I wrote my name slowly, full name, no abbreviations. It felt like claiming something, not just the house, but the right to want it. Outside, the sky was pale blue, cloudless. Birds chattered in the trees like they were sharing gossip. I stepped out into that light and took a deep breath. It didn't feel like freedom, not exactly, but it felt like air. The bank called to confirm the transfer. "Would you like to name a secondary contact?" the man asked. "No," I said. He paused. "All right then." His voice was softer after that. I stopped at the little bakery on Main Street and bought myself a lemon tart. Tom and I used to split one when we came into town. He always said it was too sweet. I always knew he loved it. I sat on the bench near the fountain, unwrapped the tart carefully. The first bite made my eyes sting, not because of the taste, but because it had been so long since I'd done something just for me. No one knew where I was. No one had asked. And for once, I didn't feel like explaining myself. There was a quiet power in that. I stopped by the little blue house before heading home, walked around the side, touched the porch railing, still chipped, still waiting. I stood there a long time, blouse rustling in the wind, like it was breathing for both of us. I imagined the boxes, the framed photo of Tom by the bed, my tea kettle on the stove, curtains I'd sew myself, pale yellow, soft cotton, a swing I'd install right on that porch beam where the hooks still waited, and me sitting there in the evenings, hands wrapped around a mug, not waiting to be invited, just being. They stood on the gravel path with their arms crossed, watching me struggle with the second suitcase. The wheel kept catching on the uneven edge, the one the realtor warned me about. Jeremy smirked. "You're joking, right? You, alone?" Lisa didn't even try to hide her laugh. "Mom's being dramatic again." I didn't answer. I just looked down at the key in my hand. It was warm from my palm, warm like a small secret I wasn't ready to share. The blue paint on the door was chipped, but it matched the shade of Tom's eyes when the light hit just right. That's why I picked it. No one asked, but that's why. The lock clicked like a whisper. I stepped inside. The air was still, not stale, just untouched. Lisa muttered something about calling once I come to my senses, and Jeremy was already halfway to the car. The engine sputtered to life before I even set the second bag down. I didn't wave goodbye. I just closed the door. It didn't slam, didn't creak. It closed, softly. And for the first time in a very, very long time, it stayed closed. The house was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a kitchen that smelled like dust and linoleum, and a living room with thin light curling across the floor like it was looking for someone. I stood there with my shoes still on and listened. Not to silence exactly, but to the space. Empty spaces have a sound, you know. Not nothing, something softer than nothing. The kettle whistled later that evening while I unpacked 1 teacup. Just 1. I left the others behind. I sat on the floor, sipping slowly, staring at the blank wall where I'd hang the photo of Tom and me from the lake trip, the one where he's sunburned and holding that ridiculous fish. No one in the photo is wearing shoes. We didn't care much about polished appearances back then. We just cared about the day not ending too soon. That night, I slept on the old couch until the bed arrived, curled up like a question mark under a quilt I stitched during the pandemic when I still believed family Zoom calls meant something. I dreamed of the time Jeremy brought me a flower crown from the school fair, sticky with cotton candy fingers, of Lisa brushing my hair with her tiny plastic comb and saying, "You're the prettiest, Mommy." They weren't cruel, not really, just grown in directions that didn't include me. The next morning, I stood on the porch with coffee and listened to the birds, not the ones in the trees, but the ones inside the walls. Sparrows, maybe, nesting in the eaves. I didn't mind. I watched the neighbors leave for work, young couples in cars full of toys and gym bags. A woman 2 doors down waved. Her smile was small and polite. That was enough. Inside, I hung up the photo. I wiped down the counters. I stitched a tiny patch on the armrest where the fabric had frayed, pink roses over beige corduroy. A secret softness. I didn't cry that week, not once. But I did talk to Tom's picture once or twice. Not loud. Just enough to remember my voice had a place. On Thursday, I walked to the little grocery on 5th and Main, bought eggs, butter, and an apple turnover. The cashier called me ma'am and helped me carry the bag. I let him. The days came and went like lazy cats, stretching in the sun, curling around my ankles. I said them one by one. Lisa texted me a photo of the baby in a pumpkin hat. I typed back, "So sweet," and left it at that. No hearts. No, "I miss you." That kind of honesty I was saving. Jeremy emailed asking if the heater was working, said he could swing by if needed. I told him it was fine, which it was. And even if it weren't, I still might have said the same, because I was finally learning that needing someone and being allowed to need them are two very different things. And when I sat by the window that Sunday evening, with the sun painting my teacup gold, I felt something strange. Not peace, not quite, but something like space. And in that space, I heard myself breathing, like I used to when I was a girl and didn't know yet who would forget me someday. I first noticed her on a Tuesday, late afternoon, when the sun slants through the curtains like it's searching for something. I was sipping my tea, half chamomile, half memory, when I saw the small figure wobbling up my walk. Her ponytail was crooked, one sock sagging below her ankle. She couldn't have been more than 4, maybe 5. She clutched something in her fist, tight, like it mattered. My screen door creaked as I opened it. She didn't flinch, just looked up with the clear eyes children haven't learned to hide behind. "I made this for you," she said, holding out a piece of paper. It was wrinkled, corners bent, a smudge of chocolate or dirt near the bottom. Crayon lines looped and twisted in innocent disarray. But right there in the center was a house. My house, blue roof, a little yellow square for the door, and above it, a red heart. I knelt slowly, my knees don't like the cold, and took the drawing like it was a letter from the past. "Thank you," I said, my voice caught in my throat, surprised to be used so gently. "What's your name?" "Ellie," she grinned. "We just moved next door. Mommy says not to bother the old lady, but you smiled at me yesterday." My heart pinched in 2 directions, one for the shame of being a warning, the other for the honor of being remembered by a child. Before I could say anything else, a voice barked from the driveway. "Ellie, get back here!" A woman in yoga pants and sunglasses marched up, her phone still in her hand. "I told you not to run off. Let's go." Ellie hesitated, looked back at me. I gave her the kind of smile you tuck into a child's pocket for later. She waved. Her mother didn't. That night, I taped the drawing to the fridge. There was only one magnet, an old ceramic teacup from Maine. Tom bought it for me on our last vacation. I don't drink out of it. I just keep it. The paper crinkled as I pressed it to the cool metal, and for a moment, my kitchen felt smaller and warmer. The next day, she knocked again, 3 small taps, like rain remembering how to fall. This time, she brought a feather. "It's magic," she whispered, placing it in my hand. "If you blow on it, your wish comes true." I didn't wish. I just nodded and tucked it behind the old vase on the windowsill, the one with one side chipped, but still lovely in the light. Ellie came by nearly every afternoon after that. Sometimes she brought dandelions, once a button she found in the dirt. But mostly, she just sat, cross-legged on my porch, swinging her feet, telling me about her day. Her stories spilled out like marbles on a wooden floor, fast, bright, impossible to catch all at once. Her mother kept her distance. I'd see her glance over sometimes, arms folded tight. She never came closer. But she didn't stop Ellie either. Maybe she thought I was harmless. Or maybe she remembered her own grandmother and couldn't quite say no. One afternoon, Ellie asked if I had any cookies. I hadn't baked in months. But something stirred. So I pulled out the mixing bowl, the yellow one with the faded rim, and let her pour the flour, giggling as it puffed into the air. She got more on herself than in the bowl, but she called them cloud cookies. We sat on the porch steps eating warm sugar and watching the wind make the trees dance. She leaned her head against my shoulder, sticky with crumbs, and I let it stay there. That night, I opened my old cedar chest. Tucked inside were the soft things I'd saved: baby blankets, Tom's flannel shirt, a half-written birthday card I never sent. I added the feather. And one of Ellie's drawings, this one of two people on a porch swing. The figures didn't have faces, but I knew who they were. The next morning, she didn't come, nor the next. By day 3, I found myself waiting by the window with 2 teacups out, just in case. On the 4th day, her mother appeared, alone. She stood at the bottom of my steps, shifting her weight like the ground beneath her didn't quite agree with her. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said finally. "Ellie talks about you a lot. She doesn't really have grandparents." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "She's at her dad's this week," she added, softer now. "She'll be back Sunday." I nodded again, this time with a smile. Not wide, just real. There's something funny about writing a will. Not funny, ha. Funny in the way an old song stops you in your tracks at the grocery store. You think you've forgotten something, then suddenly it remembers you. I started mine on a Wednesday, rain tapping soft against the window, the kind of day that smells like soil and loose ends. I didn't do it because I was sick or scared. I did it because the more I watched them, Lisa, Jeremy, even sweet little Ellie, I realized they weren't seeing me anymore. Not really. They saw the old woman with a quilt on her lap, the one who poured tea slow and didn't always finish her sentences. But I remember everything. I remember who scraped their knees on the driveway, who only liked strawberry jam and cried when we ran out, who used to come running when I called dinner like it was salvation. So I wrote it all down, not just the legal parts, the house, the bank account, the faded wedding china. Those went into the folder marked official. But there was another folder, soft blue, no label, just my handwriting, small and steady on the inside flap, what I wish they knew. I wrote about the way I fold towels, one long side over the other, then in thirds. Not for neatness, but because that's how my mother did it, and it always felt like a hug when you open the closet. I listed the names of every spice that ever cured a cold in our house, the homemade cough syrup with lemon, honey, and just a whisper of brandy, the chicken soup recipe that worked better than anything from the pharmacy. I noted who was allergic to what. Lisa can't have cashews, remember that. Jeremy used to say cilantro tasted like soap. Ellie hasn't tried much yet, but she scrunches her nose at peas. I wrote down birthdays, not just the dates, but the details, like how Jeremy always wanted chocolate cake but scraped off the icing, or how Lisa used to cry if the balloons weren't purple. These things, they're not worth anything on paper, but they are the paper. They're the layers under everything we ever built. I wrote about the sound of Tom's laugh and how it changed after his heart attack, softer, slower, like he was learning to be gentle with joy. I wrote about how the living room light hits the wall just right in October, and how I used to sit there and read poetry when they'd all left for school. I underlined the poem I want read at my funeral, just one stanza, nothing heavy, just something that makes them pause. And then, quietly, I started writing letters, not the kind you send, the kind you leave behind. To Lisa, you were always so much more sensitive than you let on. You covered it with sarcasm and ambition, but I saw the way your fingers shook when you got nervous. I hope one day someone sees that softness in you and loves you for it. To Jeremy, you were never lazy, just scared to fail, and I wish I'd told you sooner. Failing is how you learn the shape of yourself.
Don't be afraid to become the man your father hoped you'd be. To Ellie, if you find this when you're older, know this. You reminded me that I was still someone worth talking to, and that love, even from tiny hands, can knock loud enough to be heard. I tucked the letters into the blue folder and wrapped it with the ribbon from my wedding bouquet, the same one I tied around Lisa's first dollhouse, the same one Jeremy used to tow behind his toy truck, pretending it was a kite. I didn't tell them about the blue folder. I left it in the cedar chest beneath the quilt I made during lockdown. They'll find it when they're sorting through things, probably annoyed by how many memories they have to box up. But one day, maybe not right away, they'll sit down with it, maybe on a rainy day, maybe after someone says something careless and they need to feel understood again, and they'll open it. And suddenly, there I'll be. Not in the will, not in the money, but in the folds of a towel, in the smell of nutmeg on a winter morning, in the sound of an old song playing low from the kitchen. They'll hear my voice in the back of their heads, gentle, maybe a little teasing, and they'll know I didn't just leave them things. I left them me.
The door creaked open just after 5. No knock, no warning, just footsteps, hesitant, uneven, and then her voice. Mom? I was in the kitchen turning off the stove. The soup had just finished simmering, lentil with carrots and a bay leaf. The kind of soup that doesn't ask much from you, just time. I turned a corner and saw her, Lisa, my daughter who never cried, not even when she broke her wrist in 5th grade. She stood there, shoulders hunched, purse sliding off one arm. Her mascara left soft shadows beneath her eyes. She didn't look like a woman. She looked like my little girl, trying hard to stay standing. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered, and then she folded into herself like paper, collapsed onto the old sofa, the one she once jumped on with jelly sticky hands. I sat beside her, not too close, and waited, because sometimes pain has to settle before it spills. He's leaving, she finally said, or maybe she was. It didn't matter yet. All I knew was someone was going. I don't know how you did it, all those years, with Dad, with us, with everything. I looked at her then, really looked. Her hands twisted the hem of her shirt, her lip trembling just slightly. I thought about all the times I wanted to tell her that marriage wasn't a fairy tale, that love isn't always warm, and sometimes it sleeps with its back to you for years. I thought about how often she rolled her eyes when I reminded her to take breaks, to rest, to talk, not text. She thought I was old-fashioned. Maybe I am. But I still believe in showing up, even when it's hard, especially then. Still, I didn't say any of that. I just got up, poured 2 cups of tea, mine in the chipped blue mug, hers in the white one with the pink rim she used to love, and brought them over. She cupped it in both hands like it was something to hold on to. Steam curled around her face. And then she cried. Not loudly, not desperately, just steady tears, slipping down without effort. I didn't speak. I just let her cry. Because that's what no one had let me do when it was my turn to fall apart. Back then, when Tom left for days at a time and came back with silence in his suitcase, no one asked if I was okay. They just said, he works hard, and you're lucky to have a provider. They didn't see me folding laundry at midnight so the kids wouldn't feel the weight. Didn't hear me whisper apologies into empty rooms. Didn't know I cried into dishwater because I didn't want anyone to see. So now I let Lisa cry. No interruptions, no fixes, just space. After a while, she spoke again. He said I was too much, too demanding, too everything. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, just squeezed back weakly. You are a lot, I said softly. A lot of love, a lot of fire, a lot of everything someone lucky enough should be honored to carry with them. She nodded. More tears. I watched the sun shift across the floor, turning golden. That light always reminded me of summer days when the house smelled of lemonade and sunscreen. Back when Lisa used to dance barefoot in the yard, believing she was magic. I thought I did everything right, she whispered. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked full time, I made everything perfect. I shook my head gently. It doesn't have to be perfect to be worth something. She looked at me then, really looked,
And I saw it, just for a second, recognition. Not of who I used to be, but of who I still am. She stayed the night. We didn't talk much more, just shared leftover soup and sat with an old movie playing in the background. I pulled out the quilt she loved as a child, the one with the stars and faded bears. She curled up under it like she used to, and I watched her fall asleep on that sofa, her breathing evening out, just like it did when she was 5.
The first rose bloomed in late March, just a soft pink whisper, opening slowly near the porch rail. I had doubted it would take root, honestly. The soil was stubborn and so was I, but there it was, alive. Delicate, proud, and completely unbothered by who had said I couldn't do it alone. I didn't tell anyone I was planting again, didn't post pictures or ask for advice. I just dug into the earth with my hands and a quiet kind of hope, the kind that doesn't beg for witnesses. It started with the roses, then came the thyme and the basil. Then, one day, I found myself dusting off the old bread tin, the one with the worn edges and the faint smell of cinnamon clinging to its corners. I hadn't baked since Tom passed, not properly, not with both hands. But that morning, I kneaded dough while the radio played some slow tune from the 60s, and I hummed without meaning to. Funny how a small melody can sneak up on you, how joy can return without permission. The bread came out golden, cracked just right at the top. I let it cool by the window like I used to when the kids were young. And just like back then, someone noticed. Lisa came by, hovering on the porch. She didn't come in, not yet, but she looked at the flowers, at the fresh loaves cooling on the rack, and said, "You've been busy." I nodded, and when she said nothing more, I offered her a slice. She said she'd already eaten, but her eyes stayed on the bread like she missed something she couldn't name. Jeremy drove by once without stopping. I saw his car slow at the corner, saw him glance at the front yard where I'd set up the little bench with the blue cushion. He didn't wave, but he saw me. That's all I needed. You see, I never yelled. Not when they forgot birthdays, not when they laughed at my decision to move, not even when they handed me silence wrapped in politeness at the last family dinner. I just started living, not to prove anything, but because I'd finally remembered how. I filled the rooms with lavender and lemon balm, lit candles after dinner, wrote poems in the margins of magazines. No one asked me what I was doing with my days, but if they had, I'd have said, I'm watering the parts of myself I let go dry. I started calling old friends, real friends, women who knew me before I became only mom or grandma or Tom's wife. We talked about books and our aching joints. We laughed until one of us coughed. We shared recipes and regrets and didn't apologize for either. Sometimes I walked barefoot in the backyard, just to feel something real under me. Sometimes I danced a little while waiting for the kettle to whistle. And every now and then I caught them watching, from the sidewalk, from a passing car, from behind the polite curtains of curiosity. They watched a woman they once underestimated thrive. There was no speech, no dramatic transformation, just small things. A wind chime by the kitchen door, a pie crust done right, the way I stood taller when I trimmed the rosebush myself. They didn't say it, but I saw it in their faces. A little confusion, a little guilt, and maybe, just maybe, a little admiration. Because it turns out quiet doesn't mean invisible. And kindness isn't weakness. I wasn't loud, but I was heard. And no, I didn't get back at them with harsh words or cold shoulders. My revenge was simpler. It was waking up every morning and wanting to be awake. It was liking my own company, singing to myself, filling my days with sweetness instead of bitterness. I folded the letter 3 times, carefully, slowly, like I used to fold Lisa's baby clothes when she outgrew them. Not just to tuck it away, but to honor the space it took up. The blue drawer was stiff with age, a little off its rails, but it slid open with that familiar wooden sigh. Inside were rubber bands, old coupons, a chipped measuring spoon, a twist tie that no longer twisted, and now the letter. I didn't label it, didn't seal it, I just placed it there, right under the checkered dish towel I still used to wipe my hands when the bread came out of the oven.
They'll find it, maybe not right away, but one day, when they're sorting through my things with distracted hands and tired eyes, they'll pause at that drawer. They'll mean to throw most of it away, and then they'll see my handwriting. I started writing it on a quiet Thursday, the kind of day no one calls, no one visits, just the birds at the feeder and the steady hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table, my favorite place in the whole house. The same table Tom and I bought secondhand the year after Jeremy was born. The wood's worn now, soft at the edges, kind of like me. I wrote the letter in blue ink because black felt too final and pencil fades, and I didn't want these words to fade. It wasn't long, just a page and a half, but it held more weight than a will ever could. Not instructions, not apologies, just truth. I wrote, "This kitchen paid for itself in memories. Every scone I baked for Ellie, every pot of soup I stirred through tears, every morning I stood barefoot by the stove, humming to no one in particular." I wrote, "About the day I moved in, how my hands trembled on the keys, how they all laughed, thinking I wouldn't last a month alone, how I closed the door and knew, for the first time in my life, that I was finally on my own terms." I wrote, "You thought I moved away, but really I moved towards something, toward peace, toward space to be more than someone's mother or wife or quiet place to land." I wrote about what they didn't see, how I saved all their voicemails, even the short, rushed ones, just to hear their voices when the house got too quiet. How I kept making birthday cards by hand, even when no one thanked me anymore. How I kept Lisa's second-grade drawing tucked inside my recipe book, right beside the cinnamon roll page. I wrote about the silence, not the sad kind, the sacred kind, the kind that wraps around your shoulders when you finally stop begging to be understood. I told them I forgave them, for the forgetting, for the assumptions, for growing up and growing away, and only remembering me when something broke. And I told them I hoped they forgave me too, for staying quiet when I should have spoken, for loving them so hard it sometimes looked like letting them hurt me, for making a home they thought would always be there, even after I wasn't. I ended the letter with something Tom once said to me, back when we were young and everything felt loud and possible. He said, "One day, all they'll want is proof that you were here." So that's what I gave them, proof. In the smell of the drawer, in the softness of the towels, in the gentle ghost of music still clinging to the walls. That kitchen, my little blue sanctuary, was mine. Not just the cabinets and countertops, but the life that happened in it. They may remember me in bits and pieces, a recipe scribbled on a napkin, a song I used to hum, the way I said their names with so much weight. But when they find this letter, maybe they'll see me whole, not just as their mother, but as a woman who lived, who got angry and lonely and sometimes even selfish, and still loved with a strength they never stopped needing.